You spent years wondering why attraction seemed to happen for everyone except you. Then, unexpectedly, it happens. One person gets through, and suddenly, the thing you thought you were missing becomes real. That should feel beautiful, but sometimes it feels terrifying. Because when demisexual attraction finally appears, it doesn't simply create desire. It can awaken everything you spent years learning to suppress. The longing, the fear, the attachment, the possibility of rejection, and the most dangerous realization of all, you finally have something to lose. For someone who has rarely experienced sexual attraction without a deep emotional bond, attraction can feel less like a casual feeling and more like psychological exposure. You cannot simply shrug it off. You cannot easily separate desire from emotional meaning. This person suddenly matters differently. Their attention matters. Their distance matters. Their messages matter. And their silence can become strangely loud. That is where the dark side begins. Because attraction doesn't only reveal what you want. It reveals what you are afraid of wanting. Before attraction appeared, emotional distance may have felt safe. You could appreciate someone without needing them. You could care without constantly wondering where you stood. You could walk away without feeling as though something inside you had been taken with you. Then attraction arrives. And suddenly, emotional independence becomes harder to maintain. You start noticing everything. The way they text, how quickly they respond, whether their tone changed, who they follow, who they seem excited to talk to, whether they look at you differently. You aren't necessarily becoming obsessive. You may simply be experiencing something unfamiliar. Your brain has suddenly found a person who carries emotional significance. And unfamiliar significance creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates monitoring. Monitoring creates hypervigilance. And hypervigilance can quietly turn attraction into emotional surveillance. You begin collecting evidence. Not because you want to, because some part of you wants certainty. Does this mean they like me? Did that message mean something? Why did they become distant? Am I imagining this? Could they lose interest? And beneath all those questions is something much more vulnerable. What happens if I finally feel attraction, and they don't feel it back? That possibility can make attraction feel dangerous. Because rejection is no longer simply rejection. It can feel like confirmation of an older fear. Maybe the moment I finally opened the door, I chose the wrong person. Maybe I waited this long for nothing. Maybe attraction is rare because I am fundamentally different. And this is where demisexual attraction can become psychologically complicated. The rarity of attraction can make a single connection feel disproportionately important. When attraction happens infrequently, the person who triggers it can begin to feel irreplaceable. Not because they necessarily are, but because your mind has very little evidence that someone else will ever create the same response. That distinction matters. You may not be attached only to the person. You may also become attached to the experience of finally feeling something. And those are not the same thing. Sometimes you aren't afraid of losing them. You're afraid of losing the version of yourself that finally woke up around them. That can create an emotional trap. You tolerate uncertainty longer. You excuse incompatibilities. You overanalyze mixed signals. You become unusually patient with emotional inconsistency. Because walking away doesn't simply mean losing a relationship. It can feel like returning to the emptiness that existed before attraction appeared. And loneliness can make almost anything look irreplaceable. Modern dating makes this even more complicated. Dating apps encourage instant judgments. Profiles reduce people to photographs, labels, preferences, and quick impressions. Swipe culture rewards immediate attraction. Hookup culture can separate physical desire from emotional intimacy. And social media constantly reminds you that everyone else appears to be experiencing romance effortlessly. For someone whose attraction depends on emotional connection, this environment can create a strange psychological pressure. You may start questioning yourself. Why don't I feel what everyone else seems to feel? Why does it take so long? Why did nothing happen with people I thought I should desire? And then, when attraction finally arrives, there can be another form of pressure. Don't lose it. That thought can quietly transform attraction into performance. You start trying to preserve the connection. You become more agreeable. You monitor yourself. You edit your reactions. You suppress doubts. You avoid asking difficult questions. You become careful not to appear too needy. And eventually, you may stop experiencing the relationship naturally. You start managing it. That's the darker pattern. Emotional connection was supposed to make attraction feel safe. But fear of losing the connection can make you emotionally exhausted instead. You become hyper-aware of every fluctuation. A delayed message feels significant. A different tone feels threatening. A canceled plan feels like evidence. Their attention becomes reassurance. Their reassurance becomes regulation. And suddenly, attraction has become connected to emotional dependency. Not because demisexuality causes dependency. It doesn't. But when attraction is rare, the psychological meaning attached to it can become enormous. There is another danger. You may confuse emotional intensity with compatibility, because finally feeling attraction can produce relief. After years of wondering whether you would ever experience this, the feeling itself can be intoxicating. You may think, this must be special. This must mean something, and maybe it does. But intensity is not proof. Chemistry is not compatibility. And rarity is not destiny. Sometimes the most powerful feeling is simply the relief of finally feeling. That realization can hurt, because it means the person who awakened your attraction may not automatically be the person who deserves your attachment. You can deeply desire someone and still be wrong for each other. You can feel something extraordinary and still need to leave. You can finally experience attraction without turning that experience into a lifelong obligation. That is difficult for anyone, but especially when attraction feels rare. Because scarcity changes perception. What is uncommon begins to feel precious. What feels precious begins to feel necessary. And what feels necessary becomes terrifying to lose. Then comes the quietest danger. Self-erasure. You may begin changing yourself to protect the connection. You become easier to love, less complicated, less demanding, less honest. You stop asking whether the relationship works for you. You start asking whether you are still enough for them. That's when attraction stops being intimacy and becomes self-surveillance. You aren't simply experiencing the relationship anymore. You're constantly watching yourself inside it. And the person who finally made you feel attraction can unknowingly become the person around whom you disappear. But there is one final truth that makes all of this even darker. The goal was never to feel attraction at any cost. The goal was to feel attraction without abandoning yourself. Because finally wanting someone does not mean they automatically deserve access to every part of you. Finally feeling desire does not mean you have to ignore incompatibility. Finally connecting does not mean you have to tolerate uncertainty forever. And finally experiencing something rare does not mean you have to protect it at the expense of your identity. Maybe the most important realization is this: you were never broken because attraction took time. And you are not obligated to make every rare attraction become a relationship. Sometimes attraction arrives to teach you something you were never expecting. That you can feel, that you can want, that you can become emotionally vulnerable, and that vulnerability can be terrifying without being wrong. Because the darkest part of finally feeling demisexual attraction isn't the attraction itself. It's discovering how badly you want to keep it, and learning that wanting someone deeply doesn't mean you have to lose yourself to keep them.